Hey everyone, it's me, Chris, and I had a question today from a friend of mine, and what he wanted to know is how do I get nice round shoulders like The Rock, big round shoulders like The Rock has, and that's an easy answer because what you're gonna find is most of the people who have problems developing the one critical mistake they're all going to make is usually going to be some error in the technique or in how they perform the exercise. But without before I get into that, let me explain the shoulder. Okay, you have three main muscles of the shoulder, and there's a lot of different unique insertion points. So with the shoulder, you have all this unique range of movements. It goes up like this. It can go forward like it does when you're working the front delt or anterior delts here. It could pull the arm backward when you're working the rear delt, or just any combination of where the arms pull up, come up to the sides, just like this. Even when you're pressing overhead, that's usually medial delt or middle delt has a strong pull with that, or works hard to do that. So anytime that this arm has to go up overhead, that's medial delt. Some people will tell you when you shoulder press that it's front delt, but let me show you something. So even if I front press, they would say that is front delt. But see, the problem is in order to front press, okay, even though if you press to the front, okay, you'll press to the front, that's gonna activate the front head. When you finish that movement by going overhead, when you finish it, finishing the movement isn't up here like a front raise, it's overhead. Okay, so when you finish overhead, medial delt, and that rear delt will contract to keep you from going forward. It contracts to help you pull back. So all the heads are contracting, but that middle head the rear delt is contracting to cancel out the front delt. So that's kind of what it is with the movement, because when a muscle contracts, it does all of its available actions. So other muscles come in just to cancel some of those out, like it does with a lot of shoulder work. Okay. Also, okay, one of the things that a lot of people need to understand is there's a difference between shoulder girdle and shoulder joint. Okay, so like in the beginning of a shoulder press, as I press up, okay, as you see, you know what I mean, my shoulders and my scapula elevate. So that is a shoulder girdle movement in the beginning. And then right here, it stops. And now it's just mostly my arms going overhead. So the shoulder joint activates more than the shoulder girdle, okay? And recognizing that becomes important, because if your goals are only looking good goals, you of course want to isolate, all right? So you want to isolate. And this actually becomes more important when you're doing rear delt exercises. See, like most of the guys, they'll press a lot, so they'll have decent medial delt, middle deltoid development, where the actual roundness, like if you see me from the sides, that medial delt will display the roundness, okay? They'll have front delt because they do a lot of pressing, you know, and then they'll do front raises. Even though a lot of them swing, they'll do front raises. But with the rear delt, the problem is they can't tell the difference between shoulder girdle movements, which in this case, shoulder girdle, and I'll show it in the video. Shoulder girdle, in this case, when you have the arms lower and you bring them back, okay, you're gonna see the shoulder blades move, versus shoulder joint, which is what the medial delt does, okay? And as you bring that back without having the shoulder blades, kick in and cause the movement, okay? those exercises, there's a technique thing. So when you're doing lateral raises, when you want to isolate on the lateral raises, again, this is shoulder girdle. See how everything lifts up? Even the Nike on my shirt, everything lifts up. Okay, now I'm going to contract my abs and I'm going to lean a little forward. So now when I do the lateral raise, okay, this is going to be more of a shoulder joint movement. As you see, just my shoulders move. My chest doesn't really elevate like it does when I stop contracting the abs. See, now everything elevates. Shoulders elevate. You can even see my traps, you know, in this one as opposed to here. See, now I've contracted the abs to keep the shoulder girdle down. Boom. Now I'm getting better shoulder, I'm canceling out shoulder girdle movement, you know, which would include, you know, the rib cage moving up and down, the traps elevating and all that. And I'm getting more shoulder joint movement where I'm getting strictly into those heads of my delts, okay? So remember, shoulder girdle versus shoulder joint. The only time, if you're trying to get your shoulder development to go well, off the top of my head without putting too much thought into it, when you do shrugs. Okay, so when you do shrugs, you don't really want to do any of this because that's not your traps. They just simply bring them up, set them down. Bring them up, set them down. But those aren't shoulder exercises. So that's a shoulder girdle exercises. Anyway. Another problem is variety. You use the same exercises over and over. How many people only use the regular lateral raise for the medial delt, maybe upright rows, and shoulder presses, okay? Lateral raise and upright rows, if you're isolating the delts, it's the same part of the range of motion. So in that way, they're very similar. So I would either use one or the other unless I've got all my other needs covered. So what about the incline lateral raise, which compared to the regular lateral raises, it's very strong on the first 30 degrees of movement. So your shoulder is more stretched out than it is when you do a regular lateral raise. So that's why if you ever watch, I do both of them. You know, I do both of them, probably both of those two in the same workout, or the upright row and the regular lateral raise, okay? Also, the lean away lateral raise. When people do the lean away lateral raise, one of the things they want to do is they don't have the discipline to stay leaning away like this, okay, where they're holding whatever they're holding on to and performing their exercise, okay? They don't have that discipline, all right? So what they try to do is they'll do something like, I'll be leaning, but I'm going to sag in the middle and bring myself back to level, and it's the same as the regular lateral raise if you do that. So there's a lot of technical errors with that, and like I said, when you perform the other lateral raises or even front raises, because people usually perform the same front raises either with a bar. You know, no one ever sits back on an incline and pulls over longer range of motion with that front raise. Okay, so part of it's variety and part of it's technique, because you really have to let your ego go and be willing to deal with the problems of isolating the muscle, you know. So big difference. So if you want to be strong, it's a different animal. You know, you try to use your levers in a way to where you can lift the most weight, where you build mechanical advantage in your favor. Okay, when you want to look good with big full muscles, you want to do the exact opposite. You want to put as much tension on the muscles as possible and make that as difficult as you can.